In this video, we will be discussing proportions and how they relate to equations. So a proportion states that two ratios are equal. And to prove if two ratios are equal, we cross-multiply them, which is also known as the butterfly method, which you may have learned in 5th grade. And if the two ratios are equal, they are considered what is called a true proportion. So let's go through these first 4 examples, and we're going to use the butterfly method, and we're going to figure out if they are true proportions or not. So the way that you figure this out is you cross multiply. So 2 times 6. So I'm going to write out 2 times 6. And then we're going to butterfly the other way. 1 times 12. Now when we do this, we're going to make an equation. So we need to set them up equal to each other with an equal sign, just like we were doing equations. 2 times 6 is 12. 1 times 12 is 12. Is 12 equal to 12? Yes, so this is a true proportion. Let's do number 2. 12 times 1 should be equal to 9 times 4, if this is a true proportion. Twelve times 1 is 12. 9 times 4 is 36. 12 is not equal to 36, so this is not a true proportion. And I put the line through the equal sign to show that it's not equal. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for this one. So we can write 10 times 5 is equal to 50 times 2. 10 times 5 is 50. 50 times 2 would be 100. Sorry. And those are not equal to each other, so it is not a true proportion. And then the last one, we'll do 3 times 6, and we'll set it equal to the other way, which is 18 times 1. 3 times 6 is 18. 18 times 1 is 18. They come out to be equal, so yes, this is a true proportion. You could also think about it that if we were just to look at it as the ratios and not do the butterfly, you could simplify this by 3. And because it simplifies and you get the simplified answer, that's why it's yes. Where if you go to simplify this one here, 50 divided by, if I simplified by this one to get from 50 to 5, I'd have to divide by 10. But I can't do 10 divided by 10 and get 2. That's not going to work. So that's why it's no. So I want you to try by yourself the 6 you try that are at the bottom of the page. When you're done, unpause the video. And here are your answers to your you try questions. So on the next page, we talk about proportions and equations. And if you look down in the examples, there's actually variables in these problems. So we can use proportions to find a missing value, and that's what our variables are. And to find the missing value, we do these following steps. We do the cross multiplying, so we do the butterfly. And then we solve for the missing value. And then the last step is we plug the solution in the proportion to check. All right, so let's do some examples. Oops. So if we do the first example, I always like to try to start my butterfly where my x is. So x times 120. So I always put the coefficient first, which would be 120. 120 times x, I can't multiply that, so it's just going to be 120x. Then if I do the other side, I'm going to do 24 times 75. So this is still 120x. 24 times 75 will be 1,800. Now I'm going to solve it like I'd solve an equation. 120 times x, I have to do the inverse, so I'm going to divide by 120 on both sides. Cancel. I'm left with x equals 15. Now I'm going to check that. If I plug in to this proportion and make x 15, and I cross multiply this again, that's going to be 15 times 120. 15 times 120, if you check that, is going to equal 1,800, which is what the other side equaled here. So in that case, that is true for my check step. So 15 is the solution for x. Okay, let's do another example. Start with your variable. So we're going to do n times 63, which will be 63n, is equal to the other side, butterfly, 7 times 108. 63n will remain the same. 7 times 108 is 756. I need to get the variable by itself. This is 63 times n. I have to do the inverse, which is divide by 63 on both sides. Cancel. I'm left with n is equal to 12. And if I go back and I check that and I put in a 12 here where the n is, 12 times 63 is going to be the multiplication I have to do. 12 times 63 does equal 756, so I got it right because it matches what it equaled on this side. So 12 is the solution. Let's look at 13. Start with the x, multiply times the constant, so this will be 3x. Then I'm going to do 9 times 2. 3x equals 9 times 2 is 18. Solve the equation. 3 is the coefficient. 3 times x, inverse is divide by 3. I'm left with x equals 18 divided by 3 is 6. Come back and check that over here. So I plug in the 6 where the x used to be. So I have 6 times 3 is 18, which is what it was here. So I got it right. Solution, x equals 6. I want you to pause. I want you to try 14 real quick. So when we solve 14, start with the x. 2x equals, then 9 times 8. So I have 2x equals 9 times 8 is 72. Solve the equation. The inverse of multiply is divide. I'm left with x equals 36. If I plug in 36 where the x is, it would be 2 times 36, and if you check that, that is equal to 72. So that matches this right here, so we're good. All right, now let's check out a word problem 1. At the conference, there are 8 men and for every 6 women. There are 64 men, and it's asking for how many women are at the conference. So do you see, I underlined here the important information. That's what I expect you to be able to do as well. So let's set up this first fraction. And we're talking from men to women, so I'm going to label it, just like we would do with our ratios. So we have 8 men for every 6 women. That's a fraction. It's a ratio. Then I'm going to make my next ratio. There are 64 men, and it doesn't know how many women, so I'm going to use a variable. Use x. And now we're going to solve for that missing variable, so we'll cross multiply and use the butterfly method. Start with the variable. 8 times x would be 8x. 6 times 64 comes next. 8x will remain the same because I can't do anything in the variables there. 6 times 64 is 384. Solve the equation, do the inverse, which would be divide by 8. And I'm left with x equals 48 women. And if you plug that back in, if you put 48 here instead of x, eight times 48 does equal 384, like it does right there. So we got it right. So I want you to try the bottom 4 on that page. Pause the video here, try them, check them, and you can unpause to check your work. And here are your answers for those last 4 problems.